All right. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to present. And I actually am starting with my mentors, and people may not know, but these are two amazing women who actually kept me from dropping out of my PhD program, including Marcia Bates, right there. Because it was challenging, but I was able to get through it. And then fortunately I went off to UC San Diego because my wife got into the PhD program there, and I moved over there and worked with Greg Brown, fMRI, amazing neuropsychologist, Mary Steen, psychiatrist, Mr. Anxiety Disorder, social anxiety, John McQuaid, another psychologist, Mr. CBT. So I trained in all these things at UC San Diego until we then moved up to Stanford University, where my wife and I both did postdocs, and I worked with James Gross, Mr. Emotion Regulation guy, and with Gary Glover, who is this angelic fMRI, amazing methods person who just helped everybody. So I've been really blessed, and I think it's a good thing to actually thank the mentors, because that's why I can stand here. Because many other people, including not only all these people, but many other ones who help do all the work together. So obviously science is a beautifully complex, amazing, collaborative experience. And I hope it can be even more collaborative, because that's another thing. It's beyond a lab. We need multiple labs working together. Not easy to do. But boy, science would be so much better if we could. Anyway, let's get going. So I'm only going to show a little bit, but these are some of the three different kinds of domains of interventions, psychosocial interventions, many different forms of meditation, mindfulness, vipassana, compassion, and now we're studying jhana meditation. I'm only going to talk about mindfulness today. Psychotherapy, many forms of psychotherapy. I'm only going to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy today. And physical exercise, one of my favorite forms of mood and emotion regulation. And that's a whole other realm for treating mood and anxiety disorders. In the context of looking at brain behavioral mechanisms, using fMRI, now I'm starting to dabble with EEG, and now intracranial stuff, starting in July, getting into the brain, and looking at different brain systems, regulatory, emotion, etc., self-use, in the context of people, either healthy adults who have lots of stress, or people who are diagnosed or re-diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, or now chronic pain, lower back pain, and then all kinds of pain disorders, with the motivation to reduce their suffering and to optimize their performance. Basically, psychosocial is to teach them the skills and the habits to take care of themselves. That's the intention. I'm going to speak a little bit about emotion regulation, a little bit about social anxiety disorder, and much more about the effects of CBT and MBSR, two specific types of programs. So a little bit about emotion regulation. In the context of threat, real or imagined, it doesn't even have to be real. Our brains have beautifully been sculpted through evolution to respond in milliseconds well before conscious processing, to react. And so in milliseconds, you can actually go into a very rapid state of fear, arousal, anger, jealousy, or even positive emotions before it penetrates into conscious awareness. And of course, that's happening in this distributed system of amygdala, insula, rostral anterior cingulate, etc. That is an integrated functioning circuit that gives rise to a whole cascade of reactions that sends that then we measure as with respect to output. And you can see on the rightmost side, there are many different ways that we infer that somebody is experiencing an emotion. But again, no one has ever seen an emotion, right? In the same way, we've never seen a subatomic particle, but we infer its existence by facial expressions. People self-report the decisions they make, autonomic, etc., etc. That's something that's very important to keep in mind. So we're going to expand on this. But then how do we deal with this whole cascade of emotions and their sequelae? Well, emotion regulation is nothing new. Marcus Aurelius, almost 2,000 years ago, wrote a little book called Meditations. If you haven't read it, read it. It's really amazing. 2,000 years ago, he was nailing like all the things you say about emotion regulation now. reappraisal, etc. He was a Stoic philosopher. He was an orphan. If you're distressed by anything external or internal, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate, your evaluation of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. So this, nail that in your mind, you already know this. The question is, how do you develop the muscle of different emotion regulation strategies to deal with moment-to-moment experience? Resonance breathing is one way. Modulating circuits is another way. So I worked with James Gross, and he has this very simple model of 5 different types of emotion regulation strategies. So moving from left to right, something happens. You decide to enter a situation. That already is modulating the possibility of different emotions. Then situation modification. What do you do in that situation to actively up or down regulate emotion experience? How do you deploy your attention? How do you think, perspectivate, challenge, dispute, to change the emotion experience? And then after the emotion experience has reached its full blossoming, then how do you respond? Do you suppress, speaking, showing, etc.? For today, we're only going to be looking at these 2 domains, because we're looking at CBT and MBSR, which technically, preferentially, load on attention training and cognitive reappraisal. But we just finished an RCT that might challenge that conception. So emotion regulation, starting with that. So the amygdala, insula, etc., within milliseconds sends a bottom-up signal to other systems in the brain to say, please come online and help me modulate my current emotion experience. When that system is working well, you have shifts in attention regulation, you have shifts in reorienting attention, attentional vigilance, cognitive perspective taking, that sends a top-down signal to modulate. You might enhance a certain emotion. You might decrease a certain emotion. You might introduce a secondary emotion. In human animals, we also have other modules. How we view ourselves in a positive way, negative way, powerfully influences the patterns of emotional reactivity and the patterns or ability to implement cognitive control, attention regulation. How we engage in language or self-talk, these modules, also powerfully influences a person's profile of emotion experience. Here, also it's important in the context of substance abuse, I threw this in because our learning history of reward circuitry, reward mechanisms, also influences what we're attracted to, what we approach, what we avoid, etc., and what kinds of activities are actually naturalistically rewarding to us. So there are many other systems, but when this whole system is working well, my suggestion is that we can experience a much broader and deeper range of emotions. When it's not working well, hyper emotional reactivity, inefficient top-down regulation, this is, in a simple way, what leads to anxiety disorder, depression, suicidal ideation, etc. So to become a master of emotion regulation is a way to become skillful in navigating day-to-day experience. So Buell did a very nice meta-analysis of about 42 different fMRI studies looking at cognitive reappraisal to down-regulate negative emotional reactivity. So here in green are areas that are activated, prefrontal cortex, parietal, essentially that are the neural architecture, the machinery that together implements reappraisal strategies, thinking about something in a different way to down-regulate amygdala, and perhaps also insula. What I want you to focus on is this dorsal medial or pre-SMA area, because that's something that's come up again in at least 6-7 different studies in our own lab and other people's lab as a kind of uber bunny activator that kind of sets off many other neural networks to implement reappraisal. So I want you to keep that in mind. So standing on the feet of other people for a priori regions of interest is a good thing to do. So Jing Fan, Michael Posner, great gurus of attention regulation, they've done some beautiful work already mapping out networks related to different specific attention functions, attentional vigilance, reorienting or shifting attention. Top-down, goal-oriented or executive control of attention. That's what we're looking at right now. And that's what I'm going to use as an a priori map later on to look at the effects of 2 months of mindfulness meditation training in people with social anxiety. So that's one map. A little bit about social anxiety disorder. I had no interest in social anxiety disorder. I worked with Murray Steen, UC San Diego, and social anxiety essentially is characterized by fear that I'm going to embarrass or humiliate myself, Western culture, fear that I'm going to embarrass others, Asian cultures, in a way that makes me feel bad about myself. Social anxiety has a high prevalence lifetime. It's the 4th most common psychiatric disorder after major depression, substance abuse, and simple phobia. So actually a lot of people have it, but it's hardly ever, it starts early, that's one thing, often well before puberty, usually the first decade of life. It's chronic, it's undertreated, and most importantly, social anxiety is a precursor to subsequent onset of mood disorders, other anxiety disorders, alcohol and substance use disorders. So that's why this is important from a developmental perspective, because as you pointed out at the beginning, it really, you want to go to earlier, clearly diagnosable abnormalities that lead to the cascade of all kinds of other mental abnormalities or dysregulation. So here, let's look a little bit about cognitive change. And there are many different strategies, but here I came from a lab that focused on cognitive reappraisal. That's one type of emotion regulation strategy. Using MRI scanners, fMRI, looking at the bold signal. We usually do a whole battery of different tasks. I'm only going to talk about one, actually 2 today. So here, this is a task that tried to get at the most clinically relevant aspect of what a person goes through in psychotherapy. Their own narrative, their own negative self-beliefs about themselves embedded in their own autobiographical situations. Painful social situations and their own beliefs about themselves in that situation. Because that's really what you deal with in psychotherapy and CBT, people's maladaptive beliefs and interpretations. That's what this one task was trying to get at. So, for example, the social situation might trigger negative interpretations and beliefs that then triggers emotional reactivity that then reinforces things. Everyone can see that I'm nervous. I'll never be able to interact with others, and so on and so on. So we actually built the task to make this one task idiosyncratic to each individual person to get the most powerful punch, so to speak. Because if you don't have emotion reactivity, there's nothing to regulate. Ongoing debate with James Gross. The person is not really, if stimulus is not really triggering emotion, you don't need to implement or apply emotion regulation strategies. So here's just a little trial structure. You're given a cue to either react or look at the, or to regulate. You receive, your negative self-beliefs are embedded in an ongoing story that you wrote yourself about yourself. So really personalized experiences. Then your own belief is flashing for about 9 seconds in front of you. I'm incompetent. I'm incompetent. I'm not worthy. Nobody likes me. Everyone can see that I'm a fraud, etc., etc. Ugh. And then you're asked to do negative emotion ratings. How negative do you feel right this moment? So we get negative emotion ratings on every single trial, whether it be video, faces, sentences, etc., etc. So for here, we're looking at the reappraisal neural temporal dynamics. So what I'm talking about here is healthy controls showing greater bold response compared to patients with social anxiety disorder, hence the red, greater activity. And this was when people were being asked to reappraise or reinterpret the meaning of their own negative self-beliefs in order to reduce its toxicity. Actively down-regulating negative emotion reactivity. So what I want you to see from the get-go is this, that the healthy controls, this is 9 seconds. In this dorsal anterior cingulate that fed into dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, that's an area that came online right away for healthy controls, not so for people with social anxiety disorder. In fact, one of the key things is that it takes time to recruit that specific node of the reappraisal architecture in the dorsal medial or dorsal anterior cingulate, in the left and right dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and also in the medial prefrontal cortex. Similar pattern that the healthy controls could recruit that neural architecture right away when the cue came on, in the negative self-belief. So keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to look at what's the effect of treatment on that inability to recruit immediately in people with social anxiety. So a little bit about CBT and MBSR. Ostensibly different mechanisms. How many people here have done MBSR? Ooh, so few. Okay. How many people here have actually either undergone or know how to do CBT? Okay, again, very few. All right. So these are there are many different forms of psychotherapy, but these are two that are very powerful interventions that ostensibly have very different mechanisms of change. Although I think that the empirical evidence, we just finished an RCT directly comparing them, and it looks like there's actually slightly more similarity than differences when you look at changes measured every day over 10 weeks. So in this one particular RCT, we had 75 adults, unmedicated, with social anxiety disorder, randomly assigned to CBT versus a waitlist control group. Tons of assessments, post, and then follow up for a year. And the main question here was, what's the effect of CBT on emotion regulation ability? So CBT reduces self-reported negative emotion inside the scanner, as we expected. And what you can see is that from pre to post, in this case, this study was 4 months of individual, or 16 sessions of individual cognitive behavioral therapy. Compared to the white bars, what you see is the black bars, there's reduction in self-reported negative emotion to your own negative self-beliefs after CBT. That we expect, that's fine. And also what you see is that from pre to post, there's about 5 months in between, you see, again, self-reported reduction in negative emotion reactivity when asked to implement reappraisal strategies, cognitive reappraisal. And again, that's what we expected. That's just internal control. When we looked at mediators, what we actually found was that cognitive reappraisal self-efficacy measured every single week for 4 months. The extent to which that self-efficacy, belief in my ability to implement reappraisal in social situations when I needed to do so, served as a mediator of CBT on reducing negative emotion, reducing anticipatory anxiety, and behavioral avoidance, key features of all anxiety disorders. Furthermore, because we followed people for a year post-treatment completion and measured them every 3 months, we found that the extent that reappraisal self-efficacy increased, it predicted social anxiety disorder symptoms 1 year post-completion of CBT. So that's really what we want, is to predict long-term treatment outcomes with brain or behavior, or anything, in fact, because that's really what we want to find out for all of our clinical interventions. So that was good, and we've actually now found this in both for group CBT and for individual CBT. How about the fMRI? Well, I showed this to you earlier, and now what I want you to see is that, remember, there was this massive reduction in people with social anxiety disorder to be able to recruit these very important PFC, or prefrontal cortical areas. So what we found is, for two specific areas, the dorsomedial prefrontal cortex and the left dorsolateral, these are change scores from pre to post CBT in black and pre-post waitlist, no change. So these two regions out of 7 were the two regions that increased the most pre-post 4 months of individual CBT. And these are two crucial regions, dorsomedial, left dorsolateral, for reappraisal. So that made sense, and that's fine. But now going further, the question is, so do we see changes in the timing of neural recruitment? And what you see here is from pre-CBT to post, there was an increase in the ability to recruit this dorsomedial prefrontal area in people who were treated with social anxiety disorder. Earlier recruitment, both for the dorsomedial and the left dorsolateral. So this is beginning, when you really want to be as a neurodetective. So this is saying one of the effects of cognitive behavioral therapy is to make access to neural architecture that's important for top-down regulation of reappraisal early. Because it's actually in those seconds that decision-making occurs. So whether it's substance abuse, driving a car, listening to a friend, or paying attention to your own inner experience, it's a matter of seconds that a lot of different processes occur. So if one of the effects of clinical interventions is to make those neural nodes and networks more recruitable, not only in magnitude, but earlier, that's a key feature. So that's fine, but now how it's going a little bit further. So we did what's called a context-dependent functional connectivity analysis. So we took this dorsal medial prefrontal cortex as the seed and asked the question, in the entire brain, what are the other regions in the brain that are covariant with that, controlling for full response when you're reacting, and really looking at reappraisal, controlling for reacting to your own negative self-beliefs. And what we found is dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, right DLPFC, and another region of DLPFC. Again, typical areas that we find in meta-analyses for top-down cognitive reappraisal. What we also found was that decreases, blue, so they're inversely related with activity in the DMPFC, hippocampus, and amygdala, suggesting that as you can recruit this PFC reappraisal architecture, it's inversely related to hippocampus and to amygdala, perhaps related to reducing the kind of memory and associations, and perhaps emotional reactivity. So again, that's one of the things that we found. That's cool. Now, how about other types of interventions? So now we've done, 6, 7 different RCTs. This is one where we compared the standard MBSR, which is 2 months of mindfulness meditation training in a group setting, versus aerobic exercise. We chose aerobic exercise because NIMH told us we needed an active control condition. This is what we chose. We did not expect it to work so well. Punchline, 40, 50 different self-report questionnaires, computer tasks, etc. Pre-post mindfulness, pre-post aerobic exercise, equal improvement on every measure, also sustained out to 3 months follow-up. Self-report. Brain-wise, very different mechanisms. So keep that in mind. Depending on the level of granularity, you get very different results. So in self-reports, equally effective, great. That's not what we expected, that's what we found. Behavioral tasks, MBSR did better. And then on brain, very different mechanisms. So here, one of the basic questions we wanted to just find out is, does more meditation practice matter during the 2 months of mindfulness training? In this case, yes. Social anxiety symptom severity improvement, meaning that it went down. The more that you practice, and we measured meditation practice every day for 2 months, predicted reduction in social anxiety symptoms. We've now replicated this with a different version of mindfulness training that's 12 weeks instead of 8 weeks. That's good. It's also what we expected. We use the same task, but instead of cognitive reappraisal, actively thinking, using language, logic, perspective taking. In this case, we use an attention regulation strategy that is more like applying attention to an acceptance perspective of noticing what's happening without needing to change, challenge, or disrupt thinking. Does attention-related brain responses at baseline, pre-treatment, does it predict post-treatment social anxiety? The answer is yes. We've now replicated this in 2 studies that posterior superior parietal precuneus activation, when you're asked to go into an observing acceptance stance towards your own experience, precuneus parietal, the extent to which you can recruit that at baseline predicts treatment outcome. Brain, in the context of attention regulation, predicting symptom reduction. In this case, 3 months later. That's good. That's cool. How about changes in a priori? So I mentioned that we were using Jin Fang's executive control attention network, predefined. We said, how about the intercorrelation, a rough measure of coherence, among 8 different brain regions at baseline, mindfulness group, aerobic exercise group. What's the intercorrelation of these regions? Pretty low. Fast forward 3 months later, the mindfulness group shows a much higher degree of intercorrelation of these 8 different brain regions when asked to do attention regulation. Again, another piece of evidence of neural integration in the context of attention regulation to your own negative self-beliefs after mindfulness. Another form of functional connectivity. How about mediators? We found that measured every single week, attention regulation success, self-reported success in implementing attention regulation, served as a mediator of MBSR versus aerobic exercise on negative emotion, symptoms of depression, and social isolation. So this has helped with the whole reason to do a mediator analysis is to try to figure out, are there specific things that are changing during treatment that help us understand how and why that treatment is working. And if that mediator is not being activated during treatment, then you want to switch the treatment. The whole reason for having mediators. Just finishing up, self-referential processing, Nordhoff. Again, this is another meta-analysis that's already very old, but I think he had 16 or 17 studies here showing this conceptual self-referential processing network. Cortical midline, dorsal medial, ventral medial, dorsal medial, posterior singular. Extremely robust brain activation. In fact, much more robust than the other tasks that I have seen, at least in my hands. Here's some data showing that in healthy controls, 43 healthy controls, do you endorse, does this social trait adjective describe it? Yes, no. So you see a positivity bias, hardly any negative, in healthy controls. That's what you expect. 71 people with social anxiety disorder, low positive, elevated negative. So Murray Steen said that one way to conceptualize social anxiety is a distorted social self-view. That's what these data are highlighting. Post-weight lists, 3 months of nothing, no change. Post-aerobic, we call it wellness, post-aerobic exercise, unfortunately, no change. Post-MBSR, positive self-views, no change. Negative self-views went down. That goes along with what's trained in mindfulness meditation. It's not to enhance the positive self-view, as was done in CBT. It's just to let go of distorted views of the self. That's what these data. So now we've done this in 3 different RCTs. It's an interesting measure. So what happened pre-post MBSR? We found that in these 3 different regions that make up the conceptual self-referential network, changes in dorsomedial PFC, this Uber activator bunny, that's Tor Wager's word. He calls it the activator bunny. He's a good fMRI guy. The extent to which that change pre-post 2 months of mindfulness training, social anxiety disability decreased, and mindfulness skills increased. So that's curious, and now we actually just finished this RCT where we're looking at mindfulness, MBSR, CBT, and a weightless control group to see whether we can replicate this finding and go deeper. So in summary, CBT increases in reappraisal ability and self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is really important because it's a metacognitive perspective on my belief in my ability to implement a strategy when I need to do so. Both immediately and also they're predicted at 1 year post-CBT symptom reduction. Increases in dorsolateral and dorsomedial PFC, both the magnitude of response, earlier temporal onset, and functional connectivity from this dorsomedial PFC area pre-post CBT. For MBSR, increases in attention regulation success, increases in this intercorrelation of this executive control network in pre-post MBSR, and increases in dorsomedial PFC during self-referential processing. Lots of funding, lots of people